I don't think you know what you're talking about. Because when I say drowning doesn't look like drowning, I mean that people have died by drowning ever since humans discovered water. But it wasn't until the 1970s that Francesco Pia dispelled the belief that someone who was drowning advertises the fact through splashing and screaming, who instead argued there existed what he would call the instinctive drowning response, which states that drowning cannot cry out for help because their respiratory system is fully occupied just trying to breathe, that their instincts force them to extend their arms to try and stay afloat, which is why they rarely wave or reach out for help. The stage which precedes it is called aquatic distress, wherein a victim can still somewhat assist in their own rescue. And these words are no less made up than any of the others you've heard or read or said today, except that Francesco Pia has a doctorate on the subject, has studied film footage of near and actual drowning to support his theory on what it looks like beyond what you or I might expect from our media-steered intuitions and untrained observations, and all of this matters, because drowning is the #2 cause of accidental death in children under 16, because out of the 750 children in the United States who will die by drowning this year, 375 of them will drown within 25 yards of their parents, and in 10% of those deaths, said parent will watch them go under and have absolutely no idea their child is in danger because they think they know what drowning looks like, and they are wrong, and you still don't know what you're talking about. Because when I say that military aircraft design optimization doesn't look like military aircraft design optimization, what I mean is that during World War II, the military analyzed the clustering of bullet holes in planes returning from bombing runs and concluded, based on how the damage from anti-aircraft fire clustered mostly along the wings, the tail, and down the center of the bombers' bodies, that those locations needed extra armor. And Hungarian Jewish mathematician Abraham Wall told them they were wrong, that they were committing the logical error of survivorship bias, because they were overlooking the fact that these planes had managed to limp back to base. The critical locations were the places they hadn't been hit, because the bombers who had taken fire in those spots never made it back. And you still don't know what you're talking about, because when I say that suicide ideation doesn't look like suicide ideation, I'm responding to what you said to me about Julian's death. There was no way I could have known beforehand that she was suicidal, and even if I had, there was nothing I could have done to help her, and even if I could, that I shouldn't feel as if she were my responsibility, which is when I started wondering if Julian cared about me and taught me to care about her in a way that nobody else still living would value, let alone reciprocate, made me wonder if I belonged more with her in the grave than alive with those among those who spat on it. And this matters, because suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, because in 2015, 575,000 people visited a hospital for injuries due to self-harm, and that year, Julian was one of them, and she died in that emergency room after telling her brother she was sorry, but she was just so angry at their father. And for her funeral, her father hired a pastor who preached her entire homily without ever saying her name, before leading out the congregation and singing Amazing Grace, who afterwards asked each other, how could she do such a terrible thing? Why didn't she tell anyone how she was feeling? But before her death, they talked just like you, and probably still do, and all this matters, because every potential sign of suicide ideation gets dismissed as some kind of individual moral weakness, as if each of us exists in a vacuum and are beholden only to ourselves, which is what you are doing now. And when you tell me that everything you said, you say as someone who himself struggles with thoughts of suicide, as someone whose best friend struggles with thoughts of suicide, and when I tell you, you still don't know what you're talking about. What I mean is, it sounds like you and your best friend have come to the mutual understanding that you don't have to know what to look out for if you aren't looking out for each other. But if you think you're going to convince me to do the same, and if you think whatever experiences and coping mechanisms you have are one-size-fits-all universal to everyone else who suffers from suicide ideation, then you are wrong. And this matters, because according to the interpersonal psychological theory of suicidal behavior, suicide ideation is what falls when a person has experienced an ongoing combination of perceived burdensomeness along with a sense of thwarted belonging to a social group, meaning that your advice to treat suicidal people with contempt and isolation is the exact opposite of the ideas of those educated and dedicated towards understanding and preventing this kind of death. And maybe you would say the same things about me as you did about her if I killed myself, but you aren't me, and you didn't know her, so don't tell me how I should feel, and don't tell me how I should move on, and don't tell me how I should remember her, because you don't know what you're talking about.
Let's go!